Okay, can you all see my screen? Yes, my
Yes.
PowerPoint. Okay, so good morning. My name is Sarah Schaub. I'm the Web Services Manager here at the college. And today we are going to cover how to make your PowerPoint presentations accessible. We will record this and share it later on our YouTube channel. Uh, if you have any questions, you can use the chat or feel free to interrupt me as I'm going through it as well. And with that, I'll just go ahead and get started. Um, Today's training objectives are we're going to hopefully understand the importance of accessible presentations, ignore my typo about legal and policy requirements, discuss best practices for making presentations accessible. I'll review some examples of inaccessible content. We'll learn how to use the built-in accessibility checker in PowerPoint. We'll fix all the accessibility errors within this PowerPoint. I've intentionally left several errors so that we can use that as a learning opportunity. And then we'll lastly identify some resources for continued learning. So why does accessibility matter? Accessible presentations ensure everyone, including people with disabilities, have full access to presented information. Making presentations accessible supports compliance with our current laws and standards, including WCAG, the Washington User O1 policy, and the ADA Title II guidelines. Accessible presentations work in partnership with assistive technology, ensuring full access for people with disabilities. And accessible presentations demonstrate our commitment as a college and as a university to access for all, and it fosters a positive brand reputation. So I won't go too much into the legal and policy requirements. We've provided trainings on this, but we are essentially required by ADA Title II to follow the WCAG 2.1 level AA standards. Um, It requires us to all state and local governments to provide equal digital access to services and programs. WSU's policy UPPM 10.45 is WSU's digital accessibility policy, formerly known as 8555 and EPO 7. Those have been combined into one universal policy and procedure, 10.45. And if we ignore accessibility requirements, it obviously can lead to legal penalties, damage to reputation, and reduced engagement. We don't want that. So we'll start with structure and layout. Built-in PowerPoint layouts, optimized slides for screen readers, and enhanced accessibility. I'll demonstrate that here in a moment. Each slide should have a unique and descriptive title. This aids in the navigation for assistive technology users. We need to ensure content is read in the intended sequence by verifying reading order with selection pane. And again, I'll demonstrate this here in a few minutes. So this is the duplicated slide that repeats everything that I had on the last slide. This was intentional just towards the end as I show how to remediate the errors in this training. So text, fonts, and colors. Sans serif fonts like Arial and Corbel improve readability. It's important to use at least 28 points for body text and 36 to 40 points for headings to ensure legibility for all users. High contrast between text and background does improve the visibility, especially for individuals with visual impairments. And also don't use color alone to convey meaning, and I'll give some examples of this. So text and font examples. The first inaccessible text example is a bulleted point that says this font is too small. I think I made that font size about 14-point font. You might be able to read it just fine on the screen, but somebody with low vision or visual impairment might have a difficult time reading that font. That's why it's important to ensure that it's at the very least 18-point font, but preferably more. And then the second bullet point, I chose a scripted font. It says this font choice isn't very readable. It might look nice to some people, but it might be difficult to read for some users. And then the third bullet point says this font choice isn't very readable. It's a little bit more readable than the above font, but it still has narrow block-like letters that might be difficult to read for some users. And then the fourth bullet point is very difficult to read. It's dark red font on the dark gray background. And it says the color of this text is too dark for the background color. And if you use a color contrast checker, which I will demonstrate here towards the end, then you will see that the color contrast does not meet the requirements. So next, I'm going to go over a couple of different color examples. I have two different tables on this slide. One on the left has two columns and four rows. The header row is in the first column says project, and the second column header row says status. And then under the project column, we have three different projects listed: Project A, Project B, and Project C. And under the status column, we only are using color to identify the status of the project. So Project A has green with no text, Project B has yellow, and Project C has red. This is an example of using color alone to convey meaning. If somebody was colorblind, they would not know what these colors meant. So to the right of that is the same table, but with text added to each one of those projects to add some clarity. So in addition to it being a green column for Project A, or a green cell, it says on time. Project B, in addition to being a yellow background color, says at risk. And Project C with a red background says late. So that adds, you're using two different distinctions in order to convey meaning to the user. That would be accessible. So the next slide is color and charts. So I've got some charts here. I just mentioned this before, but if color alone is used, the chart will not be understood. Consider including shading or labels. So on the bottom left, I have an example of a chart that has a pie chart on it, and it's using color only to identify the first, second, third, and fourth quarters. No numbers, no other identifying markers, no numbers. So if somebody was colorblind, they might have an experience of the top right chart in the top right corner. And it's, imagine if everything was the same color in this chart, everything is black. You can, if you're colorblind, you might not understand the difference in just using color alone for distinction. So right below in the bottom right corner, I have an accessible chart, which uses color and text, and additionally adds the percentages for all of the different quarters. So it uses red for the first quarter with 58% listed, orange for the fourth quarter with 9% listed, third quarter is 10% in yellow, and the second quarter is blue with 23%. So that conveys the meaning to users. And if somebody was using a screen reader, they would have that identifying information along with the section of the pie chart. So that would be an accessible way to create that chart. Next, we'll talk about alternative text for images. So alt text provides descriptions of images for users with visual impairments. It should be brief and focus on key details. Combine layered images into one object for easier screen reader navigation, and including alt text improves accessibility for visually impaired users. So on the right side of this slide, I have a screenshot of a reserved parking sign. It's a gray sign that says reserved parking, Cougars only. And so an example of alternative text for this image might be something like sign with Washington State University logo that reads reserved parking, Cougars only. It's really important for images that have text on them to also state that text within the alternative text. So someone using a screen reader will have the same experience. They will not be able to read the text on an image unless it is specified within the alternative text. So at the bottom of this page, I have provided a link to WSU Core Concepts images. This page is a great resource for additional information on alternative text. The URL is wsu.edu/digital-accessibility/core-concepts/images. Next, we'll talk about links. It's important to use clear, descriptive hyperlink text instead of generic phrases like click here or learn more. Link text should make sense out of context. Avoid long, unclear, or multi-line text to help users quickly understand the purpose. The exception is when you're presenting on a screen, you want to provide the entire URL for users and consider maybe using or including a QR code. So for example, because this PowerPoint might be sent via email and also it's being presented today, I've provided both the descriptive hyperlink in the bottom of the slide as well as the full URL. So WSU Core Concepts links is hyperlinked to the website. And then also I've provided the full URL, which is wsu.edu/digital-accessibility/core-concepts/links. So that's a good practice to get into if you'll be sharing this digitally as well as giving a visual presentation. Next, we're going to talk about tables. You want to use tables to compare data. You want to use appropriate table headers. Try and avoid complex tables with merged or split cells. It's very difficult to make those accessible. Avoid empty data cells by using terms like zero, no value, or not applicable. And provide a unique caption or title to describe the table's purpose. You can find additional information about tables on WSU's digital accessibility website on the WSU Core Concepts tables page. The URL for that is wsu.edu/digital-accessibility/core-concepts/tables. So now I'm going to show on this slide some table examples. So the first table on the left-hand side has 4 rows and 4 columns. The top row is 4 merged cells. The header row is all merged cells. And then the second row has 4 individual cells. The third row has 4 individual cells. And then the last row has 2 sets of merged cells. And so this is an example of a table that would not be accessible. The reason this is not accessible is because system technology uses the table header to identify the relationship between the information in the cells. So it's very important to have one simple header row, not have merged cells so that the relationship between the header and the data can be associated. On the right, there's another example of a header or of a table that has 5 columns, I'm sorry, 5 rows and 3 columns. And the header row is not actually activated. It's just manually typed in. So it's missing a header row. And I'll show you as I go through at the end and I demonstrate how we fix some of these accessibility issues and use the accessibility checker, how that will show up using the accessibility tool. And so next, I am going to talk about using the built-in accessibility checker. So the accessibility checker detects missing alt text, color, contrast problems, repeated slide titles, reading order, and other related issues. You can keep the accessibility checker active while you edit your presentation. And this last page doesn't have a title, and I'll fix that here when we go through the remediation, but I've provided some additional resources that you can refer to on the web. The first one is how to author and test Microsoft PowerPoint presentations for accessibility. This is a really great tool. This is where I took a lot of my trainings. It's on the Section 508.gov website. The URL is section508.gov/create/presentations/training-videos. Another tool that I'll demonstrate here shortly is the Color Contrast Analyzer, or CCA. This is a really great tool that you can download for free and use as a color contrast checker on any of the content that you're working on. You can download that tool at vispero or vispero.com/color-contrast-checker. Another great resource is the Microsoft Office Make Your PowerPoint Presentations Accessible to People with Disabilities webpage. And you can access that at support.microsoft.com/en-us/office/make-your-powerpoint-presentations-accessible-to-people-with-disabilities. That's a long URL. Okay, so I am going to, can you all still see my screen?
Yes.
I am going to show you how to use the accessibility checker. So I'm going to scroll all the way back to the beginning of my presentation. And one other thing to note, I am a Mac user, and so my ribbon in PowerPoint might look different than yours. If you're a PC user, some of the instructions might be a little bit different than what you're used to, or than what I'm demonstrating actually. So keep that in mind. A quick Google search will show you, what the actual instructions are if you're a PC Windows user. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is open the accessibility checker. For me, it's under the review tab. At the top of the page, I'll select review, and then I'm going to select check accessibility. There's a little drop down to choose from, and then I'm going to select check accessibility. Now that opens the accessibility checker on the right-hand panel of my screen. And you can see there's a number of different items with check marks, some with numbers next to them, and we'll just start from the top. So the first one I'm going to look at, it says color and contrast. Hard to read text contrast is right below that. It has a check mark, which is interesting because that's not actually true, because I know I have some hard to read text in here. So it's always good to manually check your color contrast. It says I'm good job. There are no accessibility violations for this rule. And I know that's not true because I've intentionally put errors in here. So sometimes that one doesn't always pick up the errors. Next, there's a section called Media and Illustrations. And the first item listed under that is missing alt text. If I select that, it tells me I have 5 media and illustrations missing alternative text. So when I selected that, it goes to the first one on the slide, and I think I'm on slide 7. There's a little red rectangle that it's highlighting that doesn't have any alternative text. I'm going to mark that as decorative because it's not conveying any meaning to the presentation and it's not important. So I mark it as decorative and then it moves on to the next one. Again, same red rectangle on slide 8. I'm going to mark that as decorative. And then the next thing, it identifies another red rectangle on slide 9, mark that as decorative. And then on 10, which one is it highlighting? It's hiding this accessible chart that I added to the page. And so I'm going to say, I would give it a more description accessible chart with first, second, and I would give it more information. Second, third, and fourth. I can't type. Order, information. Now, I don't need to add the exact numbers into the alternative text because the numbers are attached to the pie chart and somebody with a screen reader would be able to access all of those numbers associated. If it was missing, I would need to do a lot more work with the alt text in order to make this an accessible chart. So next, I think it looks like I've got one more, and it's the sign. It's on the slide 11, and it's the reserved parking Cougars only sign. And so that's what I'm going to call it, reserved parking sign with Cougar logo that says Cougars only. And you might even describe the color, reserved parking sign, gray with red Cougar logo. You can give it a little bit more description, still keeping it short. So now it looks like if I go back to do my little back arrow to my accessibility assistant, it didn't take that for some reason. Let's just pretend that that error is not still there because I did add alternative text to that one. And I'm just going to do that. Okay, so now I'm back at my accessibility assistant and I am going to look at my next, we'll ignore that, missing alt text. I don't have any video or audio in here, so I don't need to address that. Next, there's a section for tables. And so if I select that, right below that, it looks like I have one error for missing table header. So if I select that, this table is being highlighted, the one on the right, the one that has header 1, header 2, header 3 manually typed into the table. Now, how I would fix that with the table selected, up in the very top ribbon, I would go to table layout, or I'm sorry, table design. And then on the far left in the ribbon, I would select header row. And that makes the top row the header row. And so that would take away that missing header, table header on the right-hand side. You can see that error has disappeared and now there's a red check mark. The next error that shows up is use of merged or split cells. And so this table on the left that had the example with the merged cells is being highlighted with errors because I have the top header row is merged and then the two bottom. I'm going to go ahead and fix that really quick by highlighting the whole top row and then going to table layout and under cell, I'm sorry, selecting the split cells option. Number of columns, I want there to be 4, one row, and select. Okay, so that looks terrible, obviously. So I'll delete some of that text, but oh, I didn't do that right, clearly. How do you unmerge cells here? I'm not going to waste time trying to demonstrate that, but you'd have to unmerge these cells, which I'm just not remembering how to do right at the moment. So ignore that part. But no merge cells, no split cells, no empty data cells. Try and remember that for accessibility. You can find more information about tables. This is a really good resource to keep on the WSU Core Concepts tables page. And the URL for that is wsu.edu/digital-accessibility/core-concepts/tables. Okay, oh, I accidentally closed my accessibility tool, so I'm going to open that again. So next, under document structure, it looks like one of my slides is missing a slide title. So if I select that, it goes to the very last slide that I intentionally left blank. And you can see there's no slide title on that slide. So I'm going to type in resources because that is really what is on this page. And if I go back to my accessibility checker, that missing slide title error is now fixed. Next error, it looks like I have a duplicate slide title. So in the beginning, I showed you that I had 2 identical slides that I had duplicated. That is what's being highlighted here. So I have 2 of the exact same slides with the same content and the same header title. And so I'm just going to delete slide 6 because that's the duplicate one. And that error disappears. Next, under document structure, I'm going to check the reading order. And so I suggest doing this for every single slide that you're on. I'm going to go back to my very first slide, and I am going to go back to select check reading order. And then select verify reading order. And so each slide that you're on is going to show you in the right-hand column under the reading order pane what the order of your content being read is. If it has a red check mark next to the number, then it's being read by a screen reader. If it does not, then it's being ignored. And so we marked that rectangle 5 as decorative and there's no check mark by it. And so it's not going to be read to a screen reader, which is what we want. So if I go and check the content of this, it's going to read the content first and the header second. I don't want that. So I want to make sure that the title comes first. So I'm going to drag it up above the content. And now I have title showing up first and then my content, which is what I want. Then I'm going to go to my next slide. It looks like my title is first, my content is second. That's what I want. And so I'm going to go through every single slide to make sure that everything is in the right reading order. This is the order a screen reader is going to read the content to a user. So it's important that it remains in the proper order. Again, this one, title 1, The content is number 2 on slide 5. Slide 6, again, looks like everything's in proper order. Slide 7, checking the order of things. Everything is in the proper order. Slide 8. Now this one looks like it might be, let's see if it's out of whack. So title is first, the rectangle's ignored, table 2, and then table 4. Yes, that's in the right order. Going down to color and contrast, title is first, content placeholder second, chart 6, chart 9, chart 10. All of those are in the right order. So again, I won't go through the entirety of this PowerPoint, but that's how you ensure that your content is in the right order. And you can just drag and drop things into the order that you want if things are not in the proper order. So going back to the accessibility assistant, it looks like except for a couple of slides, let's just fix them really quick so that those errors go away. Looks like I've got one more, and I will verify reading order for that one. Title, table, this one should be last. Table 5 should be last. Text 7 actually should be at the very bottom. So title, table 2, table 5, and then text box 7 should be the proper order. Okay, so going back to the accessibility assistant, we'll pretend like I have all of these. We're ignoring that missing alt text. We'll pretend we have all of them fixed. And I just closed out again of my accessibility checker. And then next I wanted to show you the color contrast analyzer that I was talking about earlier. And so I'm going to, I wonder how I might have to change how I'm sharing here. Just give me 1 second so I can open it. You see, you make this bigger. And I'm going to reshare my screen so you can see the analyzer. Oh, here we go. I need to share my whole desktop. Okay. So my PowerPoint, I'm going to open the color contrast analyzer. Again, that URL I provided in the PowerPoint, and I can send this out to you both too. But this is the color contrast analyzer. The nice thing is you can do the foreground and the background color. It has foreground listed at the top, background listed right below that. It has a little eyedrop tool that's really easy to use where you can select the eyedropper and then whatever content you're working on, you can select that color. So I'm going to go to the page where I had the really hard to read text, the red, dark red on the dark gray background, and I am going to check. So the foreground color is going to be the red. And so I'm going to select my little icon dropper here. I'm going to hover over the red and select that color. And then for the it did that for the background color. Sorry, let me do that again. I'm selecting the background color. It's the dark gray. The foreground color is going to be the dark red. So I'll select that. And it's going to tell me what the WCAG 2.1 results are. And it's identifying it as a 1.3 to 1 ratio. And then it's telling me all of the different success criteria that it fails. And so they all fail. And so it's interesting that the color contrast analyzer is not identifying this as an error. If you're a sighted user, you can obviously see it's very difficult to read the dark red on the dark gray background, but this will tell you exactly whether or not it passes or fails the WCAG standard. So it's a really great tool to use. You can just download it on your desktop and you can use it on documents, web content, absolutely anything that you're working on. So I highly recommend using that tool. Now, that's mostly what I was going to cover. We won't get too into charts and graphs. Oops, I just muted myself for this training. And we will provide a more advanced charts and graphs training in the future if people are interested in that. What questions do you have, or what additional things can I demonstrate for PowerPoints?
There was something I was curious about, um, just like taking a PowerPoint and presenting it to, I don't know, a group of people. Would, let's say, like for images, would it be useful to describe them while you're presenting? Or is it because when you send the PowerPoint to your group of people and the alt text is already included in that? Does that kind of cover that ground? I was just curious about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I try if the image conveys a meaning, I try to explain it to the user in case they can't see it. So giving a presentation, I think it's really important. If it's an example like the tables I was trying to describe and the charts, to describe that to the user. I don't always do like the greatest job. It's definitely a take some practicing, I think, to learn how to do that. But having the alternative text is more for somebody who might just be reading the PowerPoint on their own using a screen reader. So
Okay.
they will have the same kind of experience as if somebody who is giving the presentation is describing it to them. So it kind of covers both of those. So if you're only giving a visual presentation, um, you don't necessarily have to add alt text because that's more for somebody who's going to be reading it with a screen reader. If
Mm-hmm.
you're going to share it at all, then you definitely want to include alt text. Um, but yes, it's a good habit to get into really trying to explain. They call that integrated audio description because if you're providing a training to someone and you're recording it and you want to share that recording later, like I want to share this recording later, then you want to make sure that you are including integrated audio description, which means you're describing exactly what you're doing while you're doing it to the user who can't see what you're doing. And if you do that and you do it well, then you don't have to include an audio description file with your video when you post it later on. So that's kind of the
Okay.
reasoning behind it as well.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Sarah, two quick things. One is that if you have something on the slide, you're going to be reading it. That's just what you need to do, correct? I mean, text
I
on a
try,
slide.
yeah, I usually try and read what I have on the slide, um, because the user needs to have the same experience as somebody who can't see the content. So that's why a lot of times it's important to, if you're going to have a lot of content on your slides, make sure you read all the content. If you don't want to have to do that, then keep your bullet points very brief. And then just say what you want to say in addition to what's in the bullet points. But yes, it is important to read, at least read what's on the screen, um, to give the user the same experience as somebody who can't see it. Does that answer your question there?
Yeah, I mean, because I think the general rule of thumb is to keep your bullet points brief and then to explain them just in a presentation in
Yeah.
general. And I appreciate the hint about the QR code for links. That was good. And I'm glad to know that you're going to be doing another charts and graphs
Mhm.
presentation because those are the questions that I get a lot from the folks we work with. And it's things like scatter plots,
Yeah.
maps. I mean, just to make sure that
Okay.
you encompass some of those things occasionally, like an interactive mapping demonstration. And so it's more than just charts and graphs that come up in presentations.
Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely do a deeper dive into that. I'm by no means an expert, but it's always good to do a training because then I have to really learn the ins and outs of it. I've done some trainings on charts and graphs. The most important part, I think, is a lot of what we covered, which is not to use color alone, making sure you're using good legends. Using patterns is really good too to help differentiate. So yes, we can definitely do one solely on charts and graphs, possibly in maybe February. I could put that on the calendar to do. As
Maybe
far as maps and plotting maps, I don't have much experience on that, nor do I feel qualified on providing a training on that, but we can look for some resources that might be helpful for
Mhm.
users and point you in that direction.
Yeah, that's actually what we come across more than charts and graphs in a PowerPoint. I mean, occasionally, um, a, a pie chart, like you said, but mostly it's a map comparing urban growth from this time period to the next time period where you
Okay.
get. So I can send you a couple of examples of
That
the
would be
sorts of
really
things
good,
we
Martha. I
work
was
with.
just going to ask you that. Yeah, if you could send me a couple of examples, I might have a better understanding of what it is you're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and sometimes it's providing a table that identifies that data in addition to the graph or image that you're showing. That's acceptable. So if you can provide an alternative way for that data or that information to be described or displayed like a table, then that satisfies the requirement. So there's ways around that if you can't fully make it accessible within that chart or graph or plot or whatever it is, you can add additional information to help clarify the content. So
Mhm.
yeah, send me those examples.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.